Welcome to the Close the Chapter podcast. I am Kristen Boyce, a licensed marriage and family therapist with a private practice, Pathways to Healing Counseling. Through conversations, education, strategies, and shared stories, we will be closing the chapter on all the thoughts, feelings, people, and circumstances that don't serve you anymore and open the door to possibilities and the real you. You won't want to miss an episode, so be sure to subscribe. Welcome to this week's Close the Chapter podcast. I am beyond thrilled that you are joining me for this very important conversation. And the reason I think this is so important is because when you walk through a loss, whether it's a loss of a partner, a family member, maybe you've gotten a divorce, maybe you've lost a job, and you feel completely alone and you have no idea where to turn. Whether it's finances, emotional support, whatever that looks like, that's why we're having these kinds of conversations, because at the end of the day, we all want to feel like we have support, connection, to be seen, heard, and understood. So let me introduce you to today's guest. I'm so excited she's joining me, Donna Kendrick. I am so glad you're here. Let me read her bio because it's very impressive. In 2013, Donna's husband passed away unexpectedly, and she found herself suddenly navigating widowhood. After an initial period of getting things settled with her kids and their new life, she made the decision to relaunch her career and get into the role that she had found so impactful during the time of transition for her family, financial planning. She established and owns Stefton Financial, which specialized in financial planning for families and transitions. She is the author of A Guide to Widowhood, Navigating the First 3 Years, and host of the podcast Widow, Wisdom, and Wealth, with a capital R after it. Donna also guides support groups as a grief recovery method specialist. Welcome, Donna, to the podcast.
Oh, Kristen, thank you for inviting me and for giving me the opportunity to share some wisdom. Thank you so much.
I'm glad you're here. I saw that your book, like a bestseller on Amazon.
It did. It was a wonderful journey. I'm a girl from Philadelphia, so not often am I speechless. But when I saw the results come in, my husband gave them to me. I have remarried in the past year, and he was like, "Babe, you did it. You did it." I was like, "No way." It was awesome. And I'm glad that book is out there as a resource so that when widows and widowers are in those first few moments of grief, or they might have a blessing of knowing that their partner might pass, that this can be in their hands to help guide them with next steps, because the world certainly does swirl around you. And this might just be a little roadmap in their pocket that they need.
Oh, yeah. Congratulations. It is definitely needed. I've walked many people through losing a spouse, and it is so painful. Not only are you walking through grief, but now you're having to sort out all the financial information and all the bills and so many pieces and parts to it. So tell me about your journey in writing the book.
Yeah, so Sefton Financial, that's my firm. Sefton is my maiden name, and I hung my own shingle during the pandemic. I just knew I had to put some love back into financial planning, and I was like, well, here we go. And it worked. It worked well. And I just found that at the end of 2020, when everything started to release, actually early 2021, I was undoing some of the decisions that people made while they were social distancing about their finances. And I was really helping a lot of these widows navigate Social Security, navigate pension, navigate paperwork that was almost about to expire, be overdue. And I really thought to myself, like, ooh, how do I get to these people earlier? And just happened to be inspired through a webinar that I was on Zoom about how to write a book, how to carry your mission, how to make it service-based, and I went for it. So I went on a program of write your book in 12 weeks. I would wake up at like 4 a.m. every day and write from 4 to 7. We are a blended family, so we have 6 kids from, right now they're 12 to 21. And so it was just like, it was hard to get some silence. Add dogs to that and you're sunk, right? Like
exactly.
Everyone's asleep at 4 except the dogs. You're like, hoo-ha, she's up. Here we go. But then I wrote the book, and then I went through about 6 to 9 months of like editing it, going through content editors, because I'm a statistician. Like I am not a writer. And it came out pretty good though. I was happy with it. And we edited it, and then we launched that with a companion workbook all at the same time with that podcast to be able to reach more, to get that audience to know there's a resource out here. And there are financial planners like me all over the place that specialize or have so much empathy for these stages of financial planning, because the finances, they're numbers, right? But the emotions behind them are completely different. And you've got to pace yourself with that stuff. You do. So that's really why the book got out there. I was thrilled. I've been able to speak to lots of different groups. And that also opened the door to put some social media out there, to share the message, to be like, I've been there too. Like, give yourself some grace. And I'm just so thrilled of the energy of the book and what it's allowed me to do as a person, not as a financial planner, but as a person, as a mom, as a fellow widow.
Yeah. Getting up at 4 a.m., that's dedication. Woo.
God bless. Yeah. Every now and then I would hide from everyone. Like I said, like we have a place in the Poconos, upstate PA, and I would literally go stand on a deck. I don't even care if it was my deck. And I would just write, tap away on my computer just to get the quiet, the concentration. But it was worth it. I'm proud of it.
That's amazing. One of the things that I think is, I would say, fairly universal with clients I've worked with is the shame around finances, like not understanding it, feeling stupid, feeling like it's so overwhelming, whether you're going through grief or loss or just in life in general. It can bring up a lot of shame and fear. Finances have a lot tied to it emotionally. How do you help people through that shame and fear?
A lot of it is, one, allowing them a safe place to talk about it, right? We make our financial decisions based many of times on the financial lessons we learned when we were younger. How did mom and dad do it, right? How did we see it? Or I came from a blue collar family. My dad was a Philadelphia firefighter. My mom, a stay-at-home mom. So when we saw someone in like a suburban house with a yard and 2 cars, we're like, oh, those rich people. Right. So there was a lot of shame for me if you weren't a hardworking blue collar city person. And I had to get that out of my own way. As my first husband and I, actually our first house, we were so blessed, was a single over in New Jersey. We were those people and we had to get out of our own way. So a lot of it is giving someone the space to talk about how do they make their money decisions, and also the freedom to say, my spouse took care of it. And I took care of this. And there is no shame in that. We all pick our roles. We all have our strength. Now, I work with a lot of young families to make sure that there's that transparency, that even if it's the budgeting is someone's wheelhouse and the investment is the other person's, let's just make sure that we touch base once a quarter, once a year, and know where everything is, know where the passwords are, know where the will is hidden, know where that fire safe box is, know who the executor is, know who the beneficiary is. But I hope they sit together and have that transparency. And for many of us who have lost a spouse, it's almost like we're telling tales about the person that got lost. Yeah, well, my husband took care of that. And now I'm seeing that maybe he didn't do all the best decisions. Those are those things. It's so hard to have that conversation. It's almost like speaking badly about the dead sometimes. Or sometimes it's that I really, as an adult, it wasn't my role in the marriage and I'm lost. It's a humbling experience while you're already dealing most of the time with guilt because of a loss or just that straight out grief. It brings up so much. So understanding how you make your money decisions, understanding where you want to be moving forward, understanding your own strength. And then there's so many resources out there. If that's not your strength, if you're creative like numbers, how do we support you? How do we get you what you need to at least have control of the numbers, even if you don't love them?
Sometimes it's like talking a foreign language. It really is. This Roth IRA, your 401k, your pension. I mean, it can be extremely overwhelming, even just looking at a budget.
100%. So in the book, A Guide to Widowhood, there's a glossary of terms. And it's so funny. I had some of my beta readers are like, oh, it should have been named like, don't wait for widowhood, get your financial house in order. But it's true. I'm like, ooh, second book. Because it's the basics. What is your budget? What's the envelope system? Like, we don't all have to do it on a credit card, or we don't always have to do it balancing the checkbook. You can put cash in envelopes and spend out of those, as my mom did it. That's how I started my budget. Now there's computer apps or apps on your phone that feel like the envelope system. We can find those resources. But on top of it too, like you're saying, what's a Roth conversion? What's a traditional IRA? What's a SEP? These are all the things that are in that glossary at the back of the book. Pick it up and read it. Because sometimes too, financial advisors, if they haven't spent the time to get to know you, they might think you have a different financial vocabulary. And so they use acronyms that go right over top of you. Ask them to slow down. Google it yourself if you need to. Not everything on the internet is true, but Google some basic definitions if you can. And that will help you. That'll help you feel a little bit more grounded. And that's one of those points of that book. I want the widows and widowers to sit down with a financial professional and at least have some of the lingo so they don't feel lost in the conversation, and have permission to ask that advisor to slow down.
Yes, so you feel more equipped. One of the things you said that I think is really important that I want to hone in on is I work with couples. I do premarital and obviously different stages of life, blended families. And one of the things that I recommend that you just said is do not shy away from talking about finances and your family history and how you're going to do it either differently moving forward or how are you doing it now and what do you want to change, and not shying away from these conversations because they're like, oh, they brought up the budget and it was like a trigger word for somebody because they felt controlled potentially, like you're trying to control me with the finances. And maybe that was a dynamic. And it's an and in both. We have to be plugged in to how everything's managed. And I don't think we talk about that because it's not like maybe how we grew up.
Exactly. Like it might be a little voodoo topic. And on top of it, if we do talk about it, if our children hear us as couples, as partners say, okay, Sunday morning, remember, we're going to log into our client portal and we're going to go through everything. So let's sit down. And they know that it's okay to talk to your partner about money, about finances. Just that, just the kids hearing us say we're going to sit and talk about it sets the stage for what they're going to approach in their adult relationships moving forward. And we don't even realize it. So the activity, that moving forward activity, and I call it transparency, because when you understand how your partner makes decisions with money, you can be a better partner. It's not saying you have to agree. It's not saying you have to do it the same way, right? But you can be a stronger couple having awareness and understanding. For many of my clients, we do a survey. It's called Financial Virtues. And it comes up, if you heard the bull and the bear market, it comes up with what color bull you are. And I love this survey. It comes back, they secretly get their own report. They can read about from these crazy questions that took 5 minutes. Really, what is that basis? How do we make decisions? And how do we like to receive information? Do we like a diagram? Do we like intricate details? Do we want the overall big picture? And then it tells you when talking to a spouse, because many of times both my partners take it at the same time, this is how they want to be heard. And then you can see an overlap of both of their results. See where they have things in common. Emphasize that as a financial advisor or teach the clients to talk in that manner because they'll be heard by one another. And then identify where maybe that weakness of communication could be strengthened when I would have to slow down my speech because I go so fast, or where I might have to draw a diagram, or where I might have to be transparent and give up a little control. That's a big one for me. I've got all the passwords. I've got everything. Don't you touch my buckets. Each of my accounts has a bucket, and that's education, and that's spending, and that's the house improvement. Nobody else would know that, but I do. Well, I better label them in the portal so that they do know. Because one thing was very important to me after I lost my husband was if something happened to me, who's going to steer this ship? And that was one of the reasons I rushed to have a financial planner help me. And that's one of the reasons I transferred and flip my career on its head to make sure that that is labeled, that what I wanted for if I would pass the executor of my will, the guardians of my kid, to know where things are, I wanted to make sure that clients had that conversation top of mind.
So you lost your husband in 2013. You were walking through the grief, navigating, helping your kids through it. There's a lot of pieces and parts. And then you just recently got remarried. Congratulations. Now you're having to combine finances again, I'm guessing.
Blended family, blended finances. You want to hear about that?
Yes. I'm like, there's a journey here. So walk me through that.
So let's just jump into the blended family part because I think it's so important. And no, I can't write a book about blended families navigating the first 3 years because I'm just in it now. And because I was so self-reliant, I became so staunch on depending on me. In the 10-year period I was by myself, I was not willing to share a lot of the responsibility. I was not willing to share a lot of the financial needs of my family. And I was stubbornly embedded in doing it myself and not letting someone else help me. Wow. You have to have a very patient soul on the other side to help you break down those walls, to help you feel safe again, to help you share, and to recognize that some things I can share, some things I can not own all on my own, because that comes a lot of overwhelm if you just keep it on your own shoulders. And I had someone begging me to let them help. It was a lot, but here's how we did it. Prenuptial agreement made me feel better to say out loud, this was the funds that my husband and I save for our kids. So they go to my kids. And I'm going to do everything in my power to produce an income on my own to protect that asset for my kids. So it's titled that way. And this is the house. This is the house that I built after Greg left. And I was so proud of that house. Well, we've moved. Life changed. 6 kids. My house didn't fit everyone anymore. But the equity I had in the house is my equity. At the same time, everything from when we combined our families on is ours. So when we save, when we make decisions, there's a joint checking account. Who's contributing what? We really set the guidelines ahead of time. Important point. My new husband didn't really care. He's like, it just rolls. He has a whole different financial outlook than me. He's like, I will always be able to earn some money. Life takes care of us. Live it, roll. And I'm a worrier. So I was like, oh, buddy, that doesn't work for me. But it did work for me because together we're whole. He gets me to loosen the reins a little bit, to live a little bit, to not just be saving for that long life of 96. Polish family lives a very long time. And his family, unfortunately, does not. So he's like, well, I'm going to live it a little bit more. I'm like, oh, I got to give it up a little bit. It's a very happy balance between the two of us. But he had to let me hold on to some of that control. And I needed to be heard about why I wanted to protect these funds for my kids, why I wasn't trying to be selfish or not believe that our marriage would work, why it was important that I redid my estate documents so that if I died, the kids stayed with him. That was really important to me. And I wasn't going to just let it roll. I was going to take control of it because I had that life experience of knowing like how it can just feel like the wind got knocked out of your sails. So we're making the decisions ahead of time. Was that helpful?
It was so helpful. And I'm so glad you said about the prenup because people can have negative connotations with it. And I just think it can be so helpful, especially in certain situations.
It was clearing.
Exactly. And you were clear and it was an alignment. It's when you don't speak your truth and you're like, oh, I don't want them to think X, Y, Z. And then we go away from our truth that we regret it.
Yeah. And I have to say too, some of that was actually talk about clarity and transparency between couples. I have adult children. My oldest is 21. My natural born youngest just turned 18. He's about to graduate. They can hear these conversations. And if I didn't let them know that we are being adults, there's a prenup. Once we moved into this new house, there's now a postnup. Yes, the house goes to the children. But Jim, if I die, gets to stay there until he dies. There's life insurance to help cover that. But for my kids to actually hear that, no, I understand your dad and I built this. This is funds from your dad. I respect it. So it is yours in the end. But you can't kick him out. This is his family too. This is where we are all living as a family. That cleared the air. If you don't clear the air sometimes, if you're not specific, people will make up their own story to fill in the blanks. So be very specific, be very transparent. That's my advice as a mom, as a new blended family, with anyone who's age appropriate to handle the information. Also, be prepared. People talk. The more transparent you are, the more forthcoming you are, the more people may talk. Be ready for it. Have your responses down or have a thick skin and be like, all right, just roll.
Yes, I like how you're sharing communication and be specific. I mean, you're being specific. Some people are like, I would communicate it. I'm like, well, what did you communicate? Well, that it's all taken care of. Well, that's not really that we need to be clear, direct, and very specific of what have you taken care of? What does this look like? Exactly.
Here's the name of my financial advisor. Here's the name of my estate attorney. This is the executor. This is where the will is hidden. This is the key to the safe deposit box. This is the bank where the safe deposit box is. We have called a personal document locator, and your listeners can jump on my website, get it for free. But I always say it's like 6 pages of just direction, of just a roadmap, and fill it out and put it with your estate documents on January 1st of every year. So people just know where to go. Get one of those password aggregators if you feel comfortable with technology. So there's one login, and that will open up the windows of where all of your logins are, because that's where most of our documents are now.
That's really helpful. For a friend, I'm her executor. I videotaped. Where does she have everything? Where is it stored? So I had it all on video. So if my memory slips, which can happen, then I have it. And so that was really a good idea. I was like, oh, I hadn't thought about videotaping.
That's a wonderful idea. Can I use that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Go for it.
I'm going to.
It was so helpful. I wonder for you, when you lost your husband, Greg, and then you're talking to your kids about, obviously you're walking them through the grief and the loss and the pain of that. How did you talk to your kids about finances all along this journey and then into a new relationship?
Yeah, I think in the very beginning. So when I lost Greg, we lost him suddenly. He had taken his life. And so it was just shock on top of emotional, trying to sort through it all, carrying not just your kids with that topic and with the loss of their father. We had just moved into a new neighborhood. They were still getting used to a school, but also his extended family, who really were not prepared for it. So you're carrying the weight of a lot of communication. I was the keeper of the information, of the story, of the why. I was the keeper of it. So how do you, one, release information to your kid as needed, your kids, two, age specific, time specific, three, be always thinking they are listening to you. They're watching you. They're listening to you. They're listening to the adults around them. They're listening to the moms at the bus stop. So be very consistent in your messaging and know that they might hear it from someone else. So what messages do you want them to hear from you? So I think the very first thing, because my kids were younger, we had moved around. It's almost like a military life. Every 2 years, we pretty much moved. They switched schools. So they were used to some of that transition, that upheaval. Because my husband traveled a lot, not having him in the home wasn't shocking. So it was a blessing for me. So we didn't really have to deal with that feels weird daddy's not here, because we were often on our own for months at a time. But to let them know just that we were going to be okay. I was going to be able to keep my house. They were going to be able to go to college. Mommy and daddy worked with a financial planner even before you guys were born. We had life insurance and we're going to be okay. Mommy will have to go back to work. We're going to have to. Daddy made all the money. I had stepped away from my career for 7 years to follow him abroad. So that was all they needed for that point in time. When the time came about 2 years later and during a family discussion, it came clear that they weren't really comfortable in the house because he had passed there. I've said in other podcasts, you should see how quickly a for sale sign goes on the front lawn when your kids are like, we don't quite feel good in the house. We don't like being that house. But in reality, it was a call to my financial planner. It was, can I do this? What's the threshold for the house I can qualify for a mortgage? Where can I go? And that was actually a conversation with the kids. We can stay in this district, but I can only afford blank house. We can go bigger and have to put a lot of work into it. Or we can go smaller and just be able to relax and move in. And of course, I love my kids, but they're greedy. They're like, bigger, right? So,
Right, exactly.
in essence, my current husband was the guy who helped me do the repairs to the house. He worked part-time, nights and weekends, and on like contractor and house repairs. And that's how I originally had met him. Then life separated, then we met again. So who knew? Who knew that move 2 years later was going to get me a husband 10 years later? But it did. So blessings everywhere. But that was one of the conversation with the kids. Like, all right, we're going to be patient then. We are going to be living in a work zone for 2 years to get this house pulled together. As well as, no, we can't have a jet tub. We have to repaint the tub that we have. That's the budget part of it. And then also when I did go back to school for a little bit, when I decided to switch my career, even the time management, like, all right, guys, mommy's not working part-time now. I'm 10 months back into school. I'm also having to study. So there's no income and I'm studying. So this is oodles of noodles and a can of SpaghettiOs. Have a good day. Like those are those things. I don't have time to cook and we might not have the budget to get the organic food I love to feed you. We have to understand this. And they did good. They are so resilient and we give them credit for as it moved forward. And then as my career started to establish, that was another conversation. I'm going to have to hire a nanny because I have to go back to work and I have to put in very long hours. Are we okay with this? And it was almost, here I am asking almost for buy-in from a 14-year-old, a 15-year-old, and an 11-year-old at that point in time. But I was asking, I don't know why, I was asking for their permission to be okay to go do it. And they were great with it. I actually thought I was really cool to hang out with. And so was the nanny. They were like, she's awesome. She gives us Twizzlers in the car and then with a baseball. You do not. Yeah, because that sits in your teeth and that's gross.
Terrible for you, but that's beside the point.
That was helpful. And I also knew how much money I had to support myself while I relaunched my career. For many of us in divorce and widowhood, or maybe when we've been let go or relocate, we're starting from zero on the income stream again. How long can our savings support us? How long can Social Security help us? When will I lose that? When my kids turn 18? Or are they a little bit older in the birth bracket? So they get to stay one more year on Social Security because that really helped guide me on kickstarting my own career. And that was really important. And the kids also knew that.
It's communication and you're processing in real time. I always recommend process the emotions, process the experience, talk about it. Don't shove it under the rug and pretend it didn't happen. Get it out. Just like in finances, talk about it versus pretending like it's not an issue. How do you start having conversations with your kids about finances? I mean, like the budget, and here's what that looks like, and here's what this means.
Yeah, I give all the credit in the world to my mom and dad. Like they lived on a budget themselves. I've referenced already in this podcast the envelope system. My mom and dad actually had physical envelopes, and one would say entertainment, one would say groceries, one would say Phil's allowance, one would say Marlene's allowance. And my mom on my dad's paycheck, I remember her filling it with cash. She would put a big rubber band around it and she would hide it between the sheets, the big old winter drape. So my mom no longer has winter drapes, so you can't find where her money is. That's where it is, in the winter drapes. I remember my dad, in between night works, pulling out the envelopes and taking 20 out of Marlene's allowance and putting it into Phil's. I was like, Dad, you can't do that to Mom. He's like, she doesn't go anywhere. I'm like, here it is. But that's how I knew, like when the envelope is empty, we can't go to the food store. When the envelope is empty, we might have to take out of entertainment, which was like the movies once every 3 months. And we're not going to the movies because we need that money for food. Dad got hurt, so we're on 60% of his salary. Those watching my parents do that was really important. So as children, we had an allowance. So if we know we wanted something extra, it had to come out of our allowance because the envelopes were the envelopes. That was secured money. We can't touch that. So I wish and thankful that my parents taught me that and that I shared that with my kids. But I'll also tell you I'm human. And when my husband passed, I didn't want them to worry about anything. And I didn't want them to stress them out. So I took my foot off the gas and I spoiled them. Now, that lasts a little bit of time until you realize sometimes what overindulging your kids will do. And then I had to pull back and I had to grip it again. And I wish I never would have taken my foot off the gas. Now, we can't live in looking back. We just make the decisions you can. And maybe that was really healthy for the first year. But it was hard for me to teach them again the value of $1. And when did we do that? When I stopped working to go back to school, start my own business. And that was really almost, instead of trying to teach the lesson, it was sitting down and seriously having that heart to heart. It's going to be tight. This is what it means to be tight.
I'm so glad you said that because you'll see in a lot of divorce situations too, guilt. And so they'll overcompensate with buying. My mom did that. She self-medicated with shopping. And so she would order off QVC. This is when HSN and QVC like started. Yeah. And the UPS man knew my name. My parents got divorced and my mom shopped. I mean, to self-medicate her, whatever feeling she was going through. And I saw that as a child and I thought, oh, and she would buy us stuff out of guilt because she felt guilty about the divorce and taught me a lot about money, taught me a lot about saving. It really did. Even though we can say, oh, that was maybe not the best experience, I'm actually grateful for it because I feel like it created a different money mindset for me.
I love that you say that. Money mindset. Well done. Like that's what it is, right? And okay, think about it when I just talked about my dad borrowing from my mom's envelope, put in his. That taught me a value. Like, ooh, do I trust my husband with my money? So my husband didn't do anything. I was 6. I had never met my husband, but my husband and I had to work through the fact that, is he going to take anything I earn?
Yes.
That's different. And it's also different because my mom didn't work until my parents divorced, and then she had to work. Oh, and she had no credit in her name. She was Mrs. Phil Sefton. That was it. And she couldn't get a car, and she couldn't qualify for anything. So I watched her struggle through that. The takeaway, oh, I'm not going to struggle like that. Every utility was in my name, which was helpful after Greg passed. It was all my name. But that was simply because I watched my mom. Like you said, like I'm so grateful that she struggled because it helped set the mindset of how I was going to do it differently the next generation.
I think self-awareness and looking at family systems is so important. And people are like, well, I don't want to dwell or blame them. I'm like, I'm not blaming my mom. I'm not blaming her at all. I'm like, oh, this taught me what I would do and don't want to do moving forward, what I liked, what I didn't like for my mom and my dad. And I'm grateful for it. So if we can take a different perspective of, oh, let me reflect, how were the finances handled? How are emotions handled in the family system? What have I maybe internalized that I didn't realize? I'm the same as you. I was like, I'm going to save my money. I'm going to manage my money. I'm going to own it. I was one of those. And then when I got married, We went through premarital counseling 2 months into dating, which was the best investment I ever made.
Well done.
And we talked about money, and we talked about how our parents overspent and how that is something we both wanted to change and work on. And we have. Of course, marriages have their ups and downs, but really, on the grand scheme, it's the best investment we ever made. And we're on the same page about finances. That's why it's so important with your advice on transparency, communication, because that ends up being people have marital conflict, but it's deeper than what it looks like. They think it's about the money, but it's deeper. It's childhood, really conditioning and mindset that has to be explored.
100%. And that's why I always say to my clients, it's not just you right now. You might need that helping hand. You might need a counselor out there to help you. You might need the emotional freedom technique to get out of your own way for some of those things, those biases that run as a script in the back of our head. And everything is out there for us if we need it. And let's find the resource to help. I always remember having the conversation with my husband when we were neck and neck on income. We call ourselves yuppies, right? We're both educated. We're both being blessed to be hard workers with a good income. To get that single house in the suburbs, our first house, like, wow, we did this. Well, here come kids and here comes a relocation for his job. So how did I feel when I was making just as much as him, very established in my freedom after watching my mom go through a divorce, to give up my career, to give up years of building my career to follow him abroad? Now, that was a big conversation for us. And both of us had to recognize that it wasn't just the money. We could pick, oh, he makes more, I make more, who can make more in a 10-year stream, who can inflate, who has a cap. Those are all money decisions. But could I give up feeling self-reliant and really relying on his income? And let me tell you, that came back fiercely after I lost Greg. Again, financial planning, life insurance, understanding we were okay. But that insecurity came right back. And so Greg had to work a lot when I gave up my career to make sure that emotionally I could work through that. And that we did too. We went to counseling before we went abroad, not because there was a problem, to make sure we didn't have a problem moving forward, to make sure we were on the same page, transparent in, I say that word a lot.
I love that word.
Really,
I love it.
Very forthcoming in, yeah, I feel like I'm making a sacrifice. So please help me maybe pull back on the budget a little bit because I feel nervous spending. I want to have the bigger cash reserve because I know my income isn't there anymore. So that will make me feel better if I have more available cash just to look at, just to put in a bank. That made me feel better. And that was one of the big compromises.
I like how you're sharing about what you needed and why you needed it. And then you were able to communicate from like, this is how much, I'm not sure if you said specifically, this is how much I want to see in reserves. Because I find that people want to see a certain number in reserves, if possible.
Sure. As a financial planner, we're always like 3 to 6 months of what it takes you to be you. But maybe I needed to see 16,000. Maybe Greg needed to see 32. That's emotional. And we have to find out the why behind it, respect it, or talk it through.
What are the top 3, I would say, the most important pieces that you've learned being a widow as it regards to finances? What are the top 3, would you say?
1, breathe. I call it the 24-hour rule. If it's a bigger decision, allow yourself to breathe. Not overanalyze, that's not what we're saying. But not every decision has to be made right away. Because I do find that during widowhood, you have so many helpful people that might be giving you what they think is the best advice ever. You might have to double check that. For their situation, that might have worked. It might not work for yours. So 1, breathe. Give yourself 24 hours. Do your research. 2, and it kind of conflicts with number 1, listen to your belly. You know in your gut. You know if it's right, if it's wrong. So when you're breathing, when you have that 24-hour rule, don't shut off. Don't shut off that belly. There's no right or wrong decision. It's just forward movement. And I do believe in that. 3, have forgiveness for yourself. You already heard me say like, yeah, I took my foot off the gas and I spoiled the heck out of them. And then I had to go to little boot camps like already. But forgive yourself because you're doing the best you can. And none of us have a crystal ball. So forgive yourself that way. If I'm going to put my financial hat on, 1, cash reserve, have 6 months of what it does cost you to be you, because we are on our own. And we might have streams of fixed income like Social Security or pension or a pool of life insurance money that came in. But for many of us, we've never had that much money in our hands before. Get your financials, get your 6 months put aside, and then pause, and then get some guidance. The second one is take care of immediate needs. know which ones are transitional. You might not have to make all those decisions right now. I talk about giving yourself breathing room, a 24-hour rule. You might be able to give yourself a 3 to 5 month rule before you make that decision. It's not urgent. Feel free to table it. And then there's long-term goals. I remember being like, I'm a person that has goals in control and I run towards them. Oh my God, the goals I set after 2 months after Greg died were completely different 3 months later, completely different 3 years later, completely different 5 years later. And now when I look back at the 10-year mark, I'm like, oh my God, what was I thinking? That's okay. Give yourself those long-term goals and let them change if they need to. 3, find your tribe. Not everyone is going to have your best intentions at heart, but many will. And many of times it's the people that you don't even know or in your community who are your biggest cheerleaders. So find your confidant, find your one person to walk down your side, that one person to take with you when you make your estate documents, because we're filled with emotion. We need someone else to take the notes. We need someone else to listen. As a financial planner, I play that role for many of my clients. I will just sit in the back of the Zoom room. I'm just taking notes. That's me, because we are quickly and emotionally involved in accounting decisions and estate documents, especially when we feel vulnerable about money or about our financial security. So get that tribe. And with that, find your tribe. Take the help when they offer it. There's no Academy Award for being the best griever. I tried it. I thought I was. I was faking it. Year 2 came and it was like, duh, I just faked it for the whole past year. And by that time, I had said no to so many of the people that wanted to help, and I felt alone. Let people help. Be wary. Have those 2 trusted confidants. They're the trusted ones. But yeah, if someone's going to offer a meal trade, okay. If someone's going to say, I'll bring your son back from baseball, why don't you go home and take a bubble bath? Oh my God, yes. You want to go for a wine? How about a box? Those are the things that you need to be willing to say yes to. I was a little bit too stubborn. Wish I would have said yes a little more.
That's really good. Those are all 6 of those were excellent and so helpful. Is there anything that we missed that you feel like is important to tell our listeners?
I think the biggest message I just want to share out there is you're not alone. There are lots of resources out there. You have your therapist, you have your group counseling, you have grief recovery method, you have your church, you have your community. It's okay to be private, but you are certainly not alone, not in your finances, not in your emotions, not in caregiving for your kids. And if you're an older widow, you're not alone in life. Reach out, have the support where you need it and when you need it. And there's nothing shameful to it, nothing at all. That's what we're about. That's community. That's living in this beautiful country of ours. Take advantage of it.
Support is essential. Yeah. It's essential. Where can people find you if they're interested in learning more? You gave so much helpful wisdom.
Oh, thank you. The website is www.widow-wisdom.com. There you can find out the book. You can download this free resource, that personal document locator I talked about, free download there. And you can also link into the podcast, Widow, Wisdom, and Wealth. That's available too. Instagram, Widow and Wisdom. That's where I have a little fun. If there's spelling errors, I'm sorry. I don't know how to correct the captions. I'm a financial planner and a mommy. My daughter always calls me from college. She's like, you got another typo. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing.
You're like, just give me some grace.
Yeah, I think that null set curve is very bad in the most recent one. That's the word that is like, I'm like, what was I saying? I was like, oh, it's null set curve. Yeah, that didn't translate. But that's it, widow-wisdom.com, and you'll find the world of help. That's where you can also link into the grief recovery method. If anyone's in the Philadelphia area, I do that in person, no charge. And our next group is the 2nd week of September on Wednesday nights. We're always rolling that through.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for your wisdom, your heart, and your energy, and just turning your pain into purpose to help others. I'm so grateful for you, and I know this will be helpful to others. So thank you so much.
Oh, I hope so. Thank you for having me, Kristen. Let me spread a little wisdom around.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much for listening to the Close the Chapter podcast. My hope is that you took home some actionable steps along with motivation, inspiration, and hope for making sustainable change in your life. If you enjoyed this episode, click the subscribe button to be sure to get the updated episodes every week, and share with a friend or a family member. For more information about how to get connected, visit Kristen, KRISTEN, Boyce, BOICE.com. Thanks and have a great day.